Right then, sorry everybody for the slight delay there. Slight delay trying to get the settings just right so I can go live. Anyway, welcome to my live session. Today what I'm going to be doing is using watercolour white to work on the chest of this lovely chiff-chaff. Okay, so I want that chest to stand out to make it feel a bit more rounded on there. So what I'm going to do is get these brushes wet, well, one in this case, alright. This is a size 00 by the way, and let's get started, shall we? Now, watercolour white is one of those tricky things that not everybody likes to use. I know. This is just my way of painting, okay? And there's a variety of different white paints on the market. So it's a matter of looking around and see what you can find. What you need really for watercolour-based white paint is something that's opaque. Now, I've done a little video, which I'll put a link down in the description down below for you later on different white paints which I've used in the past. Or even tested like that. Look at this lot. I know. There's quite a few though, isn't there? So the opaque white for the SA is one I normally use, but they've changed their properties. I think they have anyway, so quote me if I'm wrong. And I don't think it's all. People have told me it's a bit more yellow now. So the other one you can use, which I tend to recommend, is this one by Shinhan Pass. And that's quite a good one, that. Again, I've got a link in my description down below for that one, for my materials list. So have a look at that one if you're interested, okay? And also there's other ones from the Winsor & Newton, Cotman version, Hoydama Coel and Winsor & Newton, and there's also designer use gouache as well you can use. So you can use white gouache instead if you want to. So have a look around, see what you can find when it comes down to watercolour white. Now I'm just toning down the top of the head a minute, 1 second. This is a mixture, by the way, burnt sienna and burnt umber. Just put a little bit more brown towards the top of the head, because I think with chiff-chaffs, they do vary in colour slightly, I've found from the photographs I've looked at. And the colours can be quite greeny in places, hence the yellow within the chest here, but also brown. So it depends on the photograph, depends on the light of the day, depends on the male or female, I suppose, as well, maybe. I don't know if they differ, so it's worth looking into that if you're not sure. But for me, what I'm going to do, I'm going to work off with this one first of all. This is the SCA one. Put a little bit of watercolour white. Get off my paper there, look. Look at that. That's all dry paint on there, you know. Just within my mixing palette here. There you go, there's plenty in there. Now when I squeeze the side of the tube, that shrinks back in there, look. Whereas normally, it's sticking out like that, see that? If I squeeze the side of it, it goes back in. Then I can put the top back on again. When this gets all clogged up, by the way, what you want to do is just clean that off with a bit of kitchen roll or something like that, just to tidy it back up again afterwards. And then, get my mini pipette, because I bought this size by mistake. It should be about twice as long as that, by the way. Yeah, I know. See, when you go on these shopping channels online, always check the sizes. I know. Done it many times in the past. Now then, let's have a look. Watercolour white. What I'll be doing with this watercolour white as well is toning it down a little bit. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if anybody's interested, this chiff-chaff, what I'm going to be doing is making this into a Patreon video tutorial as well, where I'll be mainly talking about mixing the colours and applying the basic kind of foundation washes for the body and the head and so on. So that will be available at some point in time on my Patreon channel. Okay, alongside the other 150 plus or nearly 150 plus of the videos we have there as well. Now then, you're ready. Load your brush up. Give it a tap or two on some kitchen roll, which I've got off-site, off-camera I mean, just a little bit there. Then we can make a start. I'm going to zoom into my photograph a minute. You can see the one just in the bottom right-hand corner there. Just by, got the wrong place, just by lifting off towards the edge of the paper. If you find this doesn't move enough, then obviously your white is too thick. If you find that, that is kind of fading as it dries, then the white is too thin. Having a thinner white is really useful actually in certain cases, certain situations where it's a little bit duller in places. For example, down here, I'll show you what I mean when I get down there. A bit more water in there, I think. So this is slightly thinner. But look how blobby that is on there. That means I've got too much on the brush. So I'm going to take a little bit off on some kitchen roll off camera, just by tapping it once. And then I've got a finer line again. Also what I'm doing, I'm looking at the direction that the lines go in for the feathers. I can see down here that the lines go more towards probably about 8 o'clock direction. I know, I tend to work off clock faces a lot. Good way of explaining things, I think. It's about 8 o'clock, something like that. And they vary slightly as they go downhill as well, don't they? They really do. In fact, down this side here is a little bit tinted on that side, isn't it, as you can see? Slightly tinted around there. So I do need to make sure with that little tinted area, that I don't want to go too deep or too bright with the white. See, that's really bright there. If I do, what I can do is overlay that with some colour later on. But you've got to be careful with that. Again, I'll show you that very shortly. Okay, once I've got this white on the chest, I'm going to be online live today for probably about half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. That's how long it takes to kind of get this chest painted over. But whilst I'm doing that, I'll give you some little hints and tips along the way as well. Just a little bit more down there. Just a touch more. And don't forget as well to subscribe to my channel. So if you're not subscribed yet, click on that subscribe button down below. And also click on the like button as well. Because at least that way around, when we put a new video on here for you to watch, you shouldn't miss it. Hopefully anyway. Fingers crossed. Now, have you ever heard what the chiff chaff sounds like? I'll just play this for you just for a minute. This is the sound it makes. I don't know if you can hear that. It's very, very quiet. That's going downhill there now. A little bit down there. It's a lovely little sound. It really is. Quite a high pitch as well, really. Okay. So a little bit more down here. And then I'm going to overlap some of these lines as well. See, that's slightly too thick. What I've done in the past as well, if I've applied too much paint in one area, or it's gone down too thick, the lines are far too wide, then what I'll do, I'll get some dark colours, particularly dark colour here, which you can't see, hang on, that one there, there you go. Viridian green and alizarin crimson for dark, thick, creamy colour, okay, which I've got off camera, which I tend to use for the dark areas on this bird. Sometimes I use lamp black as well. I know. It's one of those colours that people don't always like to use. Make your own black if you can. Look at the direction these go as well. You can see that these are overlapping. So imagine like a fan, but then you've got another fan overlapping like that. Okay, can't do that with that finger. And by doing so, well, basically what that's doing is giving like a lattice effect over the top of the chest here. And that's what I'm trying to achieve, just very carefully, as I'm applying this paint. Okay. Are you painting a bird at the moment? If you are, leave me a comment down below and let me know what type of bird that is. I'd be interested in finding out, actually. It'd be quite nice to know what sort of birds people like to paint. As well, garden birds, big birds, birds of prey. You tell me, let me know. Okay, put it in the comments. Now then, a little bit more down here. I've noticed these lines actually get shorter the higher up they go. And I've got to be careful around here really, because we've got the yellow hint around there. And what I can do, I'll overlay that colour with a little bit of my yellow paint, which is Gambo Hue and the raw umber. Then the bristles end up doing this a lot. And it can ruin your brush after a while, especially when you're working with a size 00. This one is by Winsor and Newton. It's a size, I'd say size 00. And it's a series 111. I had to think then. I've been using them for years. Many years. I also use a lot of Rosemary and Co brushes as well for my paintings, which I tend to do. They're lovely brushes, they really have. Okay, just down here. Now you can see what I mean by overlaying these lines just gradually. A bit more water in there, I think. Just by doing it gradually. Just a few more down there. And I can see these are sort of in patches down here. So you got, I'll just do one separate so you can see what I mean though. I'm also going to do it a little bit thinner, this white, so it fades slightly as it dries. Take some paint off, too much on the brush. So we've got a patch like that. So remember that idea, that way around. I can't quite get my hand in that position. Like that. So there's one patch. Okay. We've already got a patch up here. Then what you need to do is sort of join these patches together just by a few odd little lines here and there. Sort of in a similar direction. So you've still got two patches just a few little light lines in between, kind of joining them together. So do work in patches when you're working on a chest. Johnny said chest hairs then. Chest feathers. Chest hairs. Ah dear. What time of the day is it? Yeah, it's still morning. And then gradually start to look at the direction you've got to go into as you work your way around. Notice how bright it is on this side of the chest as well. Now, I've got a bit of a tide mark going around the outside edge here, so I need to cover that tide mark up. So again, I can use a watercolour white. I can also lift paint off as well by using a damp clean brush and just taking off just a touch a little of the background just on there, look, just a small amount of it. And then that'll lighten that area down and stop it looking like a bit of a tide mark down there. Bit of a dark edge. So very carefully, 2 hairs in air. That's all I'm doing here. Ooh, went all posh then. Ooh, that's all I'm doing here. And a little bit more around there. I want to sort of stagger some of these lines just underneath the chin here. I kind of work my way up there. Look. And I'm starting from the inside, pulling out. The idea is, if I get a bit of scrap watercolour paper a minute, yeah, that's bright, isn't it? What I'm doing, I'm starting from the centre, or from the edge, so on the inside of the bird, like that. So you always end up starting with a dot, don't you? As soon as you put your brush down, even when you try to do it very lightly, you start off with a dot. So that's why I start from the inside. So start off with a dot, and then flick out, like so, look. And by doing so, you get a nice tapered edge to that line. So that's what I'm working on here, just to kind of taper out those edges. Rather than having a dot on the outside, I'd rather have it on the inside where it could get covered over. So a little tip for you if you want to get some sort of nice feathered effects. Now, because I've already added numerous layers underneath this, so basically a couple of layers of kind of wet and wet washes for the background colour, and also some basic detail over the top with some darker details using my kind of black colour shown you earlier on, of the Viridian Green and the Alizarin Crimson. That then gives me more of a backdrop, sort of the foundation colours, so I can work on this, so I can start adding the white over the top. Because the thing is, if you haven't got a sort of a dark background, the white won't stand out, will it? So that's why you need to make sure you've got some colour on the paper first, of a reasonable sort of depth of tone really, so it stands out. I know. Depends on the subject, of course. And this method I'm using here is very much the same, or similar anyway, depends on the direction of the feathers, or etc. in this case, as working with animals with fur. You know, so if you're working on a dog or cat, something like that, you find it's quite a similar process. Not quite the same, but very similar. Because it depends on the length of the hairs and so on with that, doesn't it? Okay, so a few more down here now. Working in these patches still. I'll move my photograph out of the way a little bit so we can see this area on the photograph. I'm going to water this down a fraction more. Look at the state of that brush now, look. Getting a bit messy. Tap some off on some kitchen roll. Then start to work towards some paler areas. Slightly paler around here. A little bit brighter on this side here actually, so I'll have to make a note of that. So while I'm going down to the pale areas, I want this to kind of dry a little bit paler. So you can see it looks quite bright when you first put it on the paper, but that will tone down a little bit. It could just dullen as it dries, because it's slightly waterier. I say watery, this is more of a milky consistency really. Like that. Now if I wanted to water it down again, what I can do, a little bit of water in there, a little bit of paint in there, so it's really watery in there, isn't it? Okay, let's pick some of that up, tap some off. And you see what I mean? Look how watery that is. I can barely see it, and that'll fade to nearly nothing down there. But it's on the paper, it's another layer, you know, to the feathers as well. I want this to look sort of full when it's all sort of dry on there. Okay, a little more around there. Actually, we were listening to Chiff Chaff singing away just yesterday, to be honest. We were down in some woodlands, some local nature reserve. And it's lovely to hear, it really is. Kind of listen to that song that they've got, you know. And that's why I quite enjoy listening to Chiff Chaffs, you know, they're a lovely, lovely sound. Okay, just down here. There's one there, look. Oh, lo and behold, a Chiff Chaff. Okay, a few more down here. Right, okay. Trying to see where it's a little bit darker in certain areas. I'm going to thicken this slightly more up. Just going to work towards the edge here. I'm on the edge of the bird. Just down here. And trying to also consider the length of these lines as they come out towards the background. This is where it sort of finishes the bird off towards the edge here, look. So we've got the lines just kind of hitting the background here, overlapping this bit of a tide mark as I mentioned. And that's there because I used masking fluid to mask off the bird before I started painting it. So I'm going to work on the background first basically, without having to worry about the background going over the bird. Okay, it's down there. Can't believe it's 20 past 11 already. I know, where's time fly? So if you do have any questions you want to ask as well, as I mentioned, pop them in the comments down below. Quite interesting to kind of hear what you've got to say. Make sure it's painting related, obviously, of course it's got to be painting related. You'll be surprised what I do get. And I'll do my best to answer some of those questions for you once this is finished going live. If there's anything urgent, then post a little comment now and I might get told by a certain individual who sat downstairs watching this at the same time as yourselves. Okay, just a little more down there. See, that's too thick, so I'm going to tap it on some kitchen roll and just thin it out a little bit. That's better. That's better. Then work your way down again underneath the belly here. So do you struggle with watercolour white? Let me know, because I know that watercolour white is a tricky colour. It is a colour really, and of course it's a colour that people tend to find when they use it. Because trying to get the consistency right, and because different manufactured ones, as I mentioned, different kind of makes of watercolour white do vary in consistency and the way they work. It's difficult to kind of say this is how to do it because it depends on which one you're using as well. It really does. This is just my way of doing it, by the way. Or do you prefer to just leave the white of the paper? If you do, how do you apply this sort of effect while using the white of the paper? I'd be quite interested to find that out actually. Yeah. Now looking around here and trying to still think about this sort of cross-hatching all the time, but slightly curved lines as well. And they're not that long either, are they? Not really. And you can see the way it's starting to look much fuller now, isn't it? It really is. What a difference that's made. I know. What a difference a day makes. Anyway, behave yourself, Paul. And then more around the view. Now, if this is a little bit jerky, this video today, let me know. I mean, the thing is as well, our broadband isn't the fastest. So because of that, it might be a little bit kind of jerky along the way. Might buffer every now and then. So for that, I do apologise. But unfortunately, because we live in a very rural location, we don't have the kind of speed of broadband which we would like to have. I'm just going to branch some of these lines just in towards this sort of mid-tone area, nearly dark area there. That's sort of bringed it all together. It's kind of joined it, hasn't it, really, around that area? Just what I'm looking at. And these are a bit curved around there. I want this slightly thicker now. Okay, let's rinse that brush out a minute. Keep meaning to do it, and I keep thinking, we'll do a few more lines. Don't be tempted. Think about the quality of brush, look after it. And never mix your paints with your detail brush. I've got an old brush to do that with. But just ruin that tip of the brush. I mean, these brushes are not expensive, it's a medium sort of price. So, it's well worth looking around to see what you can find. I don't very often buy expensive brushes, I'll be honest with you. I very rarely buy anything more than a few quid. Okay, just a few more down there. This is slightly darker in here as well, isn't it? So I'm trying to maintain that darkness, but you still have the white lines over the top. So it's trying to get a happy medium between the two, really. Okay, a bit more paint there. It's going on. Very lightly now. I'm going to put a few more down here. Let's move my photograph again. Now my photograph is on a tablet in front of me, by the way. So if you've got an iPad, tablet, anything like that, it's ideal kind of work from. I've got it on a homemade plastic stand, a Perspex stand, which was made basically with a heat gun and bent it. And it works really well, I have to say. It really does. Now down here there's a few odd hairs which go over the top of the claws or the feet. Or a few odd lines. I'm going to put them in. So I've got the tide mark down there. So I need to just add a little, less water within the paint red. So I need it slightly thicker like that. Roll it. Pull it away as you roll that like that. There we go. Nice little point on the top. I'm not going to tap it this time though. I want to make sure this stays fairly white. Again. The only thing with a smaller brush tip, you don't get quite as much paint on that brush. But you do get fine lines. Now again, if you're interested in this particular brush, I've got it in my materials list down below in the description. Yes, you know. Okay, just down here. And a few more down there. Nearly there now. Nearly there. You'll be pleased to hear. Good fun though. You've got to take your time over this. You really have. You don't want to rush it. I never rush a painting. It takes as long as it takes. It really does. And if I do a very large painting, or maybe a cat, not a domestic cat, probably a wild cat, something like I did one recently for my members on Patreon, a cheetah. So painting a cheetah is quite a complicated one to do, but it's good fun to do as well. And that will be released in a couple of months' time. Actually, it might be next month saying that particular one. Yeah, I think it might be. But that's done with, the top layers with a very fine brush like this one here. I think I might use this one, I might use one similar to it. I tend to vein my brushes sometimes. Takes a while to do, but again, never rush it. Always take regular breaks when you're working on a painting as well. That's something I always do. Make sure I put the kettle on and have a cup of coffee, okay? Maybe a biscuit if we're lucky. Which for me, not normally the case. I know. Feel sorry for me, please. So I'm going to pull a few little lines down here. Now I've got the greenery here, so what I'm going to do for these buds, I'm just going to go right underneath those and between. Think about where that line goes over the top and continue it along and flick it out. Then a few odd ones go in slightly different directions around that area as well. A little bit more paint. Just pick up that little area there. Look how they stand out because it's quite dark behind. That's what I said, you need that dark area. I think it was a Bob Ross said once, was it? You can't have dark without light or vice versa, something like that. So you definitely need a darker colour for it to stand out. And then just down here again, a little bit more. Slightly brighter now, below this area here. Overlapping. The also good thing about watercolour white as well is that if you put a line on, if you're doing cat's whiskers or something like that, you can very lightly go over that again once it's dry. Let it dry first of all though. I've got water on my hand then. Let it dry first of all, because at least then that way around, you can add another layer over the top. If you try doing it while it's still damp, you'll end up moving that paint. Okay, so you want to be very, very careful of that. So I think we're about there now. Finally. Okay, right. Now, colour washes. Now, as I mentioned, this particular bird, well, it has actually down there. So I'm going to use my yellow again, which is that one there. As I mentioned, that's going to be Gambo Hue and Raw Umber. I'm going to also use a size. I just want to use that. I don't know what to use. I'm going to use a size 6. I've got white paint on my fingers there. This is a Rosemary & Co. XP Series 366. A nice new brush I've got. Lovely brush. Got a very fine tip on it. Look at that. Oh, yeah. So I can use that one to add a little bit of yellow in places. Now, when you do this in one fell swoop. So one go, one light pass. Make sure the white paint is dry first of all. I don't need a great deal. That probably needs to be watered down just a fraction in there. Okay. Take some of that paint off the brush. And here we go. Now then. Very lightly, I've got the side of the brush on the paper like that. Very lightly. Just go over the paper like so. If it's too much, We can always tone it back down again with some white paint over the top. A little bit there. Also on the side here, well, I've added that white paint there. Touch more around here. Just add that there. Maybe intensify this one down underneath as well. Just add a touch of colour. So water that down a little bit more now. And add a tiny amount around here as well. Now that'll dry a little bit paler, which it will. If I keep going over that, the white paint underneath will move. And when that moves, it will go all sort of muddy looking. So you don't want to do that. Let it dry. I'll give it a blast with a hairdryer from a distance, if you can first of all. Now, on that damp paper, which will soften as it dries, just over some of that yellow that we got there. Look. Knocks it back a little bit. And there we go. And that gives some ideas how to work with watercolour writing. It really will. Really will. Really will. Now, okay. Now, as I mentioned, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, because I will go live again at some point. If you want me to go live again, please let me know in the comments down below, because it's something I'm interested in doing a little bit more every now and then, okay? So I would like to know that and get some feedback on it, please. Now, if you want to have a look at another video as well, how about watching even more watercolour bird tips, okay? So what we'll do, once this is finished going live, we'll put a little link on the end of this video for you to click on. And, well, until then, I'll see you then, okay? Have a good day and talk to you soon. Bye for now.